Hi, everyone. My name is Chelom Eastwood Leavitt, and I'm really excited to be here to visit with you tonight on this Instagram live feed. This is my first time doing this, and so I'm really excited to be visiting with you tonight about intimacy in marriage, healthy sexuality in marriage. So a little bit about myself. I got my PhD from Penn State University, and I have been studying sexuality and mindfulness for quite some time now. I'm a professor at Brigham Young University, and I teach the Healthy Sexuality in Marriage class, along with some other classes on marriage and sexual mindfulness. And so I really love this topic. I really love the importance, the power of sexuality in our relationships, in our marriages. Let me tell you a little bit more about myself. I have been married to my husband, David, for a very long time now. We have 8 children. 4 of them are married, and I hope someday the other 4 get married, but right now our littlest is just 4 years old, so it will be some time before that happens. I study sex and mindfulness. Like I said, I have a really awesome job. I love the research I do, and I love the teaching that I do too. But I want to say that one reason I really love this topic is that sexuality and sex in our relationships, in our marriages, really has the potential to strengthen and empower marriages and help people develop as individuals. Intimacy is really intended to make people grow, to grow as a person. Intimacy actually takes a lot of work. It isn't for the faint of heart. It challenges us to change, to question, to develop new skills. When we're in a relationship with a person that we're committed to, we're bound to have disagreements, right? And problems that we have to work out. So intimacy challenges us to really do some introspection and to maybe see what it is in my life that I need to change to make a more peaceful, harmonious relationship. So sex is just one type of intimacy, right? There's emotional, intellectual, relational, lots of types of intimacy. But during sex, there are a number of hormones that increase, that actually flood our brains. As we have heightened arousal, some of these hormones flood our brains and literally help us connect, create deeper connections and deeper and more meaningful attachment with our partner. It's a powerful way to deepen a loving marriage. But being healthy in our sexual relationships requires some skills and some intentionally meaningful behavior. Because of that, we need to make sure that outside of sex, we're working on really seeing the needs of our spouse, developing strong relational habits like earning trust and developing commitment and regularly practicing gratitude and forgiveness. So there's lots of skills that we need to be developing outside of sex to make sure that our sexual relationships are strong and are connecting us in the right ways. All right, so I'm going to just answer some questions that are some frequently asked questions about sexuality, and then maybe we'll have some time and I can answer a couple questions that come in through the feed. All right, so the first one is, what is the connection between a healthy sex life and a happy marriage? I love this question. It's important for us to know. You know, sex is pretty foundational. And it's pretty foundational to strong marriages, right? It's not the only thing, but it is an important element of a strong marriage. Historically even, marriages weren't really official or legal until they had been sealed or consummated by the couple having sex, right? Because it's a necessary part of creating a marriage and a family. And it's interesting because research shows us that couples who are generally happy attribute their happiness. They attribute about 20% of their happiness to their sex life. But couples who are struggling, who aren't in happy relationships, they will attribute about 70% of their problems to their sex life. So while we can see that sex isn't everything, when we're having troubles in our relationship, sex seems to get blamed for a lot of the troubles, and it's a source of struggle. Okay, so it's important that we know there is a strong connection between our sexual satisfaction and our relational satisfaction. All right, so what are some of the things common in our society today that might inhibit a healthy sex life in marriage? Okay, well, there are a lot of things actually. And so you might just, I'll list a number of things and you just see what applies in your life and what you could maybe work on. But a few things are that a lot of us bring unhealthy attitudes about sex to the marriage. And so it's hard for us to overcome, maybe some shameful attitudes that we grew up with or some negative attitudes that are in society. When we come to sex kind of feeling like sex is shameful or it's a little taboo, it's not something I'm open about talking to my spouse about, those set a tone in our relationship. And it makes it difficult for us to really be vulnerable and open with each other in our sexual interactions. Another problem that may pop up is that we don't prioritize sex in the relationship. And so what happens when people ignore the importance of sex in their relationships, they start just kind of becoming roommates instead of lovers, right? And so relationships can get a little brittle if this is how you're treating your sex life. And we become kind of dispassionate instead of keeping that passion alive and vibrant. And we can also just fall into routines where it becomes kind of boring, right? We haven't given the time and attention to our sexual relationship to keep it vibrant. Another problem in society today is that sometimes we compare our relationships to other people's relationships instead of realizing that we have a unique set of circumstances and how the dynamics in our sexual relationship are going to work will be very different than how it works in another couple's marriage. And especially when we start comparing our relationships to what we see in the movies or on TV. This is really problematic when we start taking that as the template for our relationship. And then another problem that pops up for people is worrying too much about frequency of sex instead of worrying about the quality of sex. Are we connecting emotionally? Are we really seeing each other's needs? Are we slowing down? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But are we slowing down to really appreciate what's occurring within our sexual interactions? And so if we just go through sex quite routinely, that becomes problematic, right? We're not paying attention to the quality of the relationship, the quality of the sexual interaction. So really, let's not worry so much about frequency. I mean, we don't want to go long periods of time without sex, but more important than that, we want to worry about the quality of each sexual interaction. All right, and then maybe another issue is that we really need to pay attention to the quality of the marriage. All right, the quality of our marriage, just like I said at the beginning, the quality of our marriage is going to impact the quality of our sexual experience. And so are we really choosing to be vulnerable in meaningful ways with our partner? And this takes some courage, okay? And this takes some work and some practice. It's not easy to just kind of reveal that soft underbelly of who you are, the part of yourself that you don't want anybody to know because you're sure people would judge you for it. But in a loving relationship, you should be able to share this with your spouse and talk about, these elements of who you are and who your spouse is in a really open, vulnerable way. So essentially, if we can undress ourselves emotionally and share our everything emotionally, our hopes, our dreams, our disappointments, our failures, things that we're embarrassed about, if we can share that kind of intimacy with our spouse, then we really see the soul of each other, right? We see deep into each other's intentions, into their heart. And so when that happens, sharing ourselves physically is just a natural outgrowth of that intimacy that we've already established. And that will fortify all the things that are occurring in the marriage. That kind of vulnerability will help fortify your sexual relationship. Okay, next question. There might be a lot of other things that contribute to people struggling in their sex lives, but those are some of the main things. And I know a lot of people will want to focus on things that you see in grocery store tabloids, like, some technique or some position that may enhance our sexual experience. But what we really know from research, right, is that the things that actually enhance the quality of your sexual relationship are things like being vulnerable and extraordinary communication and taking risks with each other, right? And sharing these things that only are shared within a loving, committed marriage. All right, so the next question, and it's really on what I study, so I love talking about this. What is sexual mindfulness? So sexual mindfulness is this quality of being present in sex, right? It's slowing down the sexual process, slowing down even your arousal to a point where you can really pay attention to the sensations of just touching each other and sharing emotions with each other. And so as you sit with that and can just be comfortable kind of thinking about those sensations, observing them, even sharing them with your partner, and talking about kind of the details that we often miss when we rush through sex, right? When we just become routine in sex and kind of speed through it because we've got this goal of orgasm or, finishing in some way, that actually ruins our experience to some extent. It desensitizes us to some of these subtle things that are happening in a sexual exchange that oftentimes we skip right over because we're going so fast. We don't even have time to take it in and really absorb what's occurring in our sexual experience. So the other part of being sexually mindful is learning to be nonjudgmental about yourself and also about your partner. So I know some people when they're in a sexual experience, they may actually have a thought that just comes into their mind and it ruins the whole experience for them. Maybe they're judging themselves. Maybe they're judging the dynamics of what's happening in the sexual experience. And so what sexually mindful individuals can do is just kind of let go of those thoughts. Just kind of dismiss them, right? We don't shame ourselves for having them. That's not mindful at all. There's no shame. There's no judgment in being mindful. In fact, we just say, I noticed that I had that thought, and now I'm just going to let it kind of leave the stage of my mind, right? And so we just keep focused on our breath and the sensations that we're experiencing within this sexual experience. All right. And another aspect of it is that you want to be curious. You want to be curious about why you feel certain things and maybe what your partner's experience is. And so that can happen either in real time, during the sexual experience, or it can be something that the two of you talk about afterward. You could say, I noticed that I really like it when you touch me this way, but it was a little irritating when you touched me, in this other way. And so just being curious about why might that be? What could we do in our sexual interaction to make sure that we're pleasing each other and that we're taking the time to really slow down and enjoy and notice the details of this sexual experience? All right, and so the follow-up question to that is, how do you practice sexual mindfulness? How do you really get, a good pattern of being sexually mindful in your marriage? The first thing that you should do is just start to be mindful in your everyday life. And often what helps people with that is establishing a habit of daily meditation. And we know from research that as short as just 10 minutes of meditation each day helps people really change the quality of their thoughts. People who meditate for 10 minutes a day at a minimum are able to just kind of come right into this place where they feel quite centered. They're connected with their body. They're connected with their breath. The only thing that we have with us throughout our life that we can count on every moment of our life is our breath. And so our breath is something that can always kind of center us as we pay attention to, as I breathe in, as I breathe out, how am I feeling? Am I expanding my body and relaxing? And as I breathe out, am I letting go of tension and anxiety? Right? So we just practice that every single day. And just like any new skill, it's hard when you first start it. But the more you practice, the more you'll be able to just settle into this and, within just a minute or two, become quite centered and mindful and slow down your experience at that present moment. So really important for us to just sit and be still. In fact, just practice that right now. If you can just kind of slowly take a breath in for a few seconds. Notice how that expands you, right? It's kind of this beautiful feeling of connecting with your body. All right, and then let that breath out. Just hopefully that allows your shoulders to kind of relax. If you notice tension in your neck or wherever it is, just kind of let go of it. As each breath, as you exhale, let that tension just kind of seep out, okay? And as you practice this every day, you will become more proficient, right? It will be something that's easy for you to connect with your body. And so once you kind of master some level of mindfulness on a daily basis, start using those same skills in your sexual experience, in your sexual relationship, in your marriage. Notice that if you connect with your breath during arousal, during heightened arousal, this is something that might help you kind of release some anxiety. It's interesting because a lot of people will report that during sex, they feel more anxiety, right? About a number of things. Women in particular feel more anxiety over their body, right? We're so judgmental of our body. Such a pity because, we come in all different shapes and sizes and our husbands love us for who we are. And so we really need to kind of embrace our bodies and get comfortable with it. Be a friend to yourself. Stop criticizing, every little flaw, every wrinkle, every little, roll of fat or whatever it is that we happen to not like. Just be your friend. Be a good friend to your body and stop being so judgmental, right? So as we become more mindful, we connect with our body, we become less anxious, and anxiety is probably the biggest enemy of arousal. Okay, if we're feeling anxiety, we're not going to feel arousal. So let go of that anxiety and just start kind of connecting during sex and loving what it is you're feeling, loving your spouse that's like taking care of you and giving attention. Notice those sensations. Start paying attention. Another little interesting piece of research is that women often have a disconnect between what is happening in their body during sex, so their arousal. They have a disconnect between their arousal and what they consciously are aware of, right? And so what happens is their body may actually be feeling some arousal, right? Increased blood flow, more lubrication, and yet in their mind, they're saying, yeah, I don't feel any arousal. It's because they're so disconnected. And we know from research, mindfulness helps align those two things more closely. We have less of a disconnect between our mind and our body. So this is something that's particularly helpful for women, to get into a mindfulness practice and get connected with your body so that you can actually start feeling and enjoying the arousal that's occurring during sex. We know for women who are struggling to orgasm, mindfulness also helps women kind of bridge that gap. If we're struggling to orgasm, right, we don't need to be constantly focused on, I've got to orgasm, I've got to feel greater arousal. Instead, just let go of all those thoughts. Focus on the pleasure that you're feeling moment to moment and allow yourself to connect with that arousal. Pay attention to those sensations. And then eventually what we see is women who do that as a habit seem to be able to increase their orgasm frequency. So that's a really hopeful, really nice, little skill that we can develop just from being mindful, just from connecting and breathing. I really love that part. Okay, so it's nice for us to start learning from our body. Our body has an awful lot of wisdom. And if we can tune in and actually start paying attention to the cues that our body is giving us, that will also help increase the experience that we're having in our sexual interaction with our spouse. So there's a lot of other practices I could talk about. If you're interested, you can visit my website. We list a number of different sexual mindfulness practices. And that website is www.chelomleavitt.com. So CHELOMLEAVITT.com. And you can learn more about sexual mindfulness there. And in fact, starting tomorrow, we're going to start having some classes that you can sign up for to take some classes to learn more and practice more about mindfulness and sexual mindfulness. And we just did some research recently. We ran an intervention where we taught couples how to be more mindful and sexually mindful in their relationships. And what we found was overwhelmingly, couples improved not only in their mindfulness and sexual mindfulness, they reported greater relational and sexual satisfaction, greater communication, less anxiety, all sorts of really important things. They also reported that they were surprised at how easy it was. They were surprised at the connections that they made. Most of these were pretty happily married couples, and this just gave them an extra little boost to help them understand how to, really dig down and be more intimate with each other and connect at a greater level. Okay, so the next question I'm going to answer is, what can I do today to better my sex life? That's a really good question. I would say, of course, because it's me and this is what I research, I would say start being more mindful, right? That's something you can do today. Even if your spouse doesn't want to buy into mindfulness, it's like, yeah, I don't have time for that. It doesn't matter. Mindfulness is something you can do on your own without any buy-in from your partner, right? And so you can start to really tap in to some of these details that you may have missed along the way. Another thing you can do is start keeping a journal. Keeping a journal about your thoughts and feelings about sex really help you examine whether or not your attitudes are healthy. And as you start to learn how to have healthier attitudes, you can kind of track your progress. We know that keeping a journal really helps people. This is from research. Keeping a journal helps people process their emotions in a much more positive way and much quicker. So there's a really practical reason for keeping a journal. It not only helps us process, but it also helps us keep track of how we're improving over time. And then also, just reading some good information every day. If you can find, good information on healthy sexual attitudes, like on my website or other websites that talk about this Instagram page is constantly putting out a number of good ideas for how we can improve our attitudes towards our relationships, but then also specifically towards our own sexuality and our sexual relationship with our spouse. And so talk with your spouse about this. Talk about maybe some goals that you can make together to make sure that both of you are developing healthy attitudes and avoiding that shame and judgment that so often come with sex, and really focusing on things that draw us together and help us grow and develop. Okay, and then the next question. How can we make sex or intimacy a priority in our life? I love this question because, like I said at the beginning, so often people kind of start to forget their sex life. If maybe you've had a few bumps and challenges like everybody has in their relationship, it's hard to just kind of avoid it and just let go of it. Even getting pregnant and having a baby can kind of set some couples' sex life back a little bit. And that's what we want to avoid. So we have to make sex a priority. How do we do that? One of the best ways I know is to just set time aside every single week and say, you know what, for these 2 hours, if we can carve out 2 hours, we're going to just focus on each other. Now that maybe means that you have sex, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe it means that all you do is just talk about how much you love each other, the sorts of things that you're grateful for, how working through the process of forgiveness is going in your relationship. There's 100 things that we can share and discuss and kind of tune into each other and see, how is it that we're doing? Are we meeting each other's needs? And sometimes those needs most definitely will be sex. But sometimes those needs might be non-sexual touch or emotional intimacy, or maybe resolving a problem that has just come to your attention that isn't resolved, and maybe you're hanging on to it and it needs to be resolved so that you can move forward. But by setting aside this time each week in your relationship, it gives some space so that the two of you can work through all of these little bumps and bruises that occur in everybody's marriages. But if we tend to them as they pop up, then we'll always keep our marriage and our sexual relationship in good working order. It's when we ignore them, we put it off, we're kind of afraid. Maybe we feel a little too vulnerable to say we're sorry about something we did or didn't do. And so this gives us space to always address those issues and make sure that we are connecting with each other. Sometimes it could be that we need to speak up for ourselves. We need to say, you know what, I feel like I've kind of taken a back seat in this relationship, and I really need a little more attention, or I need some of my needs addressed. So speaking up for ourselves is a really important part of creating a strong marriage and a strong sexual relationship. And other things that we could do during this set aside time is we could just take long walks with each other. Talk about nothing or talk about everything. Talk about goals and dreams, and maybe talk about disappointments and trials, things that you need to address in your relationship so that you can connect on a deeper level. I know there's a couple that I heard about that I think they had 5 little children, and so they were like, how do we prioritize sex in our life? And so what they did is they set their alarm clock for 2 a.m. every Saturday morning. And from 2 a.m. to about, 4 or 5 a.m., all the children were asleep. They had this little window of time where they could talk or have sex or do whatever it took for them to reconnect and feel like their marriage, their sex life was a priority. So it doesn't matter. I mean, I have 8 kids. I know it's tough, and I work, and my husband works, and so we've got a lot of balls in the air. But if we really want to, we can prioritize it. We can give it the time that's required to maintain a good relationship. Okay, and then the next question, interestingly enough, was how would you answer the age-old question, how often should you have sex? I probably wouldn't answer it. I would say, you know what? That really is something that is so couple-specific. Some couples, have much more frequent sex than other couples, and both couples can be perfectly satisfied with that amount of sex. Now, the problem comes when there's a disparity between one partner in the marriage and the other partner. And so what we need to do there is use some really good communicating skills. Why is it that you want to have sex as often as you're suggesting? And why is it that you want to have sex as infrequently as you're suggesting? And what can we do to make sure each other's needs are being met, that we're really tuned in to each other and making sure that whatever those needs are, whether it's sexual frequency or whether it's non-sexual touch and cuddling, that both people are having their needs met. And that takes an awful lot of communication and kind of opening up about what it is that you're really feeling. What is the meaning behind sex? How can we develop more connection in our relationship? Okay, and then what are ways to positively communicate about healthy sexuality with your spouse? This is a really good question because, like I just mentioned, sometimes we're not on the same page as far as sex goes. And so someone might initiate and the other person's not feeling it. And so what we need to do in those situations, any situation where either one of us is initiating, we need to make sure that we're doing it from a place of love, right? We're not demanding or pressuring people to have our spouse to have sex. Instead, we're inviting. We're saying, you know what, I'm really attracted to you. I really love you. Having sex is something that I really value. It brings so much meaning to our relationship. So I would love to have sex with you. Now, if the other person says, yeah, I would too, then hooray. Yeah, you get to go and connect. But if like I'm saying, sometimes there is that instance where the other person's just not feeling it, then the one person invites lovingly, right? No pressure, no demanding, no manipulation. The other person can say, you know what? I'm not feeling it right now, but I really love you. I really love our time, our sexual interactions. But I have a headache, or I've had a long day, or I'm just exhausted emotionally. So how about let's have sex tomorrow morning or this weekend? And so we set a time aside that we can look forward to and say, yeah, we definitely want to connect. This is not a matter of I don't find you attractive, or I'm not into sex anymore. This is something where we reaffirm this love for each other. And if you find that one partner is turning down the other partner often, then maybe there's something else in the relationship that needs to be addressed. Maybe there's an issue that's kind of, under the surface that needs to be corrected and resolved. And so sometimes if we notice that maybe our sexual interactions are less frequent than they should be, we maybe need to do a little inventory of what's going on in the marriage and resolve anything. Set time aside. Make sure that both spouses are feeling valued and that their voice is heard, that their opinion matters, that they're getting the time they need to regenerate. Sometimes when women have a heavy burden of childcare and they don't have as much growth in their life as they need to feel good about themselves, it's helpful if they speak up and say, you know what? This is kind of starting to affect our relationship. So let's both prioritize some time for me to go and read a book or take a long hot shower or do something that helps me feel like I'm getting a little bit of me time. So then we can have some we time that will be really meaningful. All right. So I see a few questions here and I'd love to answer them. What books and authors do you recommend? I really love the work of John Gottman. He's done all of his work is research based. So it's not just, some idea or some, pop culture idea that's trending right now. What I really like about his suggestions on marriage, he doesn't have much on sex, but he has a lot on quality relationships. The Science of Trust is a book that I would really recommend. And all of his work is based on research. Another really good author that I love, he is a therapist. His name is David Schnarch. And let's see, you spell that Schnarch. Really strange last name, but David Schnarch. And one of the books that I would recommend from him is Intimacy and Desire. And it really is. It's focused on couples who are committed to each other, who are wanting to improve their sexual relationship, and some of the things that might be holding them back. Okay, so another question. Is it possible for a couple to be spontaneous after kids? Yeah, maybe. But maybe not. And so it's going to depend on your circumstances. But if not, if you can't be spontaneous, that's okay. We actually know that, better sex, happier sex, more meaningful sex, more frequent sex occurs within marriage, right? And so these are people who are juggling all those balls that you're talking about. So spontaneity is not all it's cracked up to be. Sometimes you just have to set time aside and say, we need to reconnect through sex. We need this time to be intimate. And that's okay. That's how responsible, mature adults handle keeping their marriage and their sexual life vibrant. Okay, another question. With so many bad examples of sexuality in the media, where can we turn to for good examples of sexuality in marriage? That's a really good question. I might have to think about that for just a second. I think that a lot of this we can learn from each other. Sexuality really is a private journey. And it's a private journey that you share with your spouse. And so the two of you can maybe read a book together. I authored a book with a couple of other professors on BYU campus, and the name of that book is Sexual Wholeness in Marriage. And so reading a good book together that shares your values may be a really good way for the two of you to openly discuss your own sexuality in your marriage, the meaning of sex, the emotions of sex, and really start charting your own course. We shouldn't necessarily have to look to other people for an example. What we do need to do is make sure that we have healthy sexual attitudes. And then we can just start being creative and charting our own course within our marriages. All right, another question. How can we get past cultural stigma and get comfortable with sex? It's a really good question and a hard one, a sensitive one. That, a lot of us grew up in families where sex was taboo. And if you were waiting until marriage to have sex, then all of a sudden you had this, instead of this no, 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 you had this go, go, go attitude, and you were suddenly supposed to know about your own sexuality and how to have this healthy relationship with your spouse. And in reality, developing a healthy sexual attitude takes some time. And so we don't do our children any favors by being, closed-lipped about this. We need to be open and talk in open, comfortable conversations about sexuality and present it as the wonderful thing it is. It's this wonderful gift for marriage to create this strong bond with our spouse. And so if that wasn't your experience, how do you overcome that? You start challenging thoughts that you have that are negative towards sex. You start realizing that you can still grow as a person. Find some good resources. My website is a good resource. Some of these books I've mentioned are good resources that are specifically about sex. And start understanding how maybe you need to make some changes. You need to rethink how you were taught about sex. All right, and we know that it can happen. I see students in my classes every semester. At the beginning, they're really tentative. They don't even know the right terminology for all their body parts. They're really hesitant to talk or ask questions. And by the end of the semester, they understand the beauty of sex, the power of sex in a relationship, how it really bonds couples together. We have these hormones that flood our brain during the arousal process. And those hormones literally help you attach to the person you're with. So what a blessing to marriage is regular, healthy sexual connection, right? That helps you attach with stronger ties to your spouse. It's a really important element. And so if we can start appreciating sex for what it is and the good elements of it, the good use of sex, the powerful tool that it is in marriages, we can start changing our unhealthy attitudes into healthy attitudes. All right, and then the last question. How can engaged couples prepare for positive sexuality in marriage? It's a really great question. I think that while you're engaged, it's important for you to understand what the attitudes of each other are. Do you both have healthy attitudes, or do you have some negative ideas that you need to overcome? You could start working on it right then. You could also start understanding what you think sex is going to look like in your marriage. Is it going to be, what are your expectations? What is the pace of sex? So start talking about some things and understanding how the two of you can be on the same page and make sex a really meaningful experience for both of you. Really good advice is that we need to slow sex down, not just while we're learning. We need to always slow sex down so that we can really pay attention to these details that too often we just rush over and miss the beauty in our sexuality. So if I were talking to an engaged person, I would say, start thinking about how you can slow down your sexual process. Think more positively about sex and be on the same page as your partner. Sex is really this sharing of our bodies with each other. And we do that willingly and we do it generously. And we also have to respect that the other person is doing it willingly and generously. And so this is something that we value, we're grateful for. We feel blessed when we have a healthy sexual experience with our with our spouse. This is something that blesses our marriages and helps us to have stronger, longer lasting, powerful marriages. Okay. Thank you, everybody. I'll sign off.